Garlic wards evil, but not murder's touch. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Share your location below. I treasure your comments. The story of the widow begins. If you asked me to pick the one smell I'd least expect to float through Nero Wolfe's office at 10 in the morning, garlic would win the prize by a long nose. The sanctity of the brownstone is usually kept intact by Fritz's tidy kitchen arrangements and Wolfe's absolute refusal to let any strong culinary odors stray where they don't belong. Which is why, when the doorbell rang, and I opened up to find a woman swathed in black silk and garlic fumes that could fumigate an army barracks, I knew my day had just been ruined. She introduced herself as Mrs. Calliope Neresis, though the widow part came tagged along like a permanent suffix. A Greek accent, heavy but not impossible, wrapped her words like a dark ribbon. She was tall, nearly my height, and her eyes had the kind of shine you see in people who either cry too much or plot too much, maybe both. I ushered her in before the whole wallpaper peeled off from the smell, and by the time we reached the office, Wolfe had already scowled in anticipation. "Archie," Wolfe said, not lifting his bulk from the chair, "the stench precedes you." "Not me, boss." Our guest I gave a polite wave toward the lady in mourning, who glided forward with the solemn grace of someone entering a church and expecting donations. Wolfe closed his eyes for a brief second. I could almost hear him count to 10 in Montenegro dialect. Then he snapped them open and offered the faintest bow of the head. "Madame, I regret that my constitution does not permit the ingestion or proximity of garlic in profusion. Kindly speak with dispatch." The widow pressed a hand to her chest as if Wolfe had stabbed her with a syllable. "It is my curse," she declared. "The garlic follows me even when I do not touch it. My husband is dead, Mr. Wolfe. He died with garlic in his throat, and they whisper I poisoned him with it." That, I'll admit, knocked the grin off even my face. I've heard of death by garlic metaphorically, usually in a reference to bad breath killing a romance, but not literally. Wolfe straightened half an inch in his chair. For him, that was like standing up and doing cartwheels. "Your husband died how?" he asked, his tone flat as a ledger. She clasped her hands. "Kostas Neresis. He was a broker of shipping contracts. Last month he dined at home and collapsed. Garlic soup. They found pieces in his windpipe." He choked. "The doctor said it was accident. But his family, his brothers, his cousins, they say it was me. That I fed him too much, knowing he hated garlic, and pushed it until he died. They say I am the cursed garlic widow." Her voice dropped on that title as though it was written on her tombstone already. She paused, waiting for Wolfe to extend his sympathy. Instead, he extended his forefinger toward me. "Archie. A notebook and air, if you can contrive it." I opened a window, which did nothing to stop the scent from expanding like enemy troops. The widow sat, back rigid, and continued. "I have no friends. They whisper in the cafes. They cross the street. My husband's relatives want the courts to believe I murdered him, but there is no proof, only suspicion and the smell that follows me. Someone has planted this curse. I need you, Mr. Wolfe, to find the hand that spreads it." Now, I've heard plenty of strange pitches in Wolfe's office, but this one had a certain bouquet all its own. I waited for Wolfe to dismiss her like yesterday's lunch menu. Instead, he rubbed his lower lip with his thumb, a sure sign that a neuron or two had been teased awake. "Why?" he asked slowly. "Come to me. You need a lawyer to prepare for a trial, not a detective to sniff at your enemies." The widow leaned forward, her eyes drilling into Wolfe's bulk. "Because you are the one man who will not move. They cannot chase you in the street or bribe you in a cafe. You sit here and the world comes to you. That is what I require. If I am innocent, prove it. If I am guilty—" She spread her hands. "Then at least I will know who set the world against me." That last line had a touch of fatalistic theater, but I have to give her credit. It landed. Wolfe hates being manipulated, but he likes being acknowledged as immovable. He regarded her, silent. I knew the signs. He was already taking the hook, but he wasn't going to admit it with me in the room. "Archie," he said finally, "arrange that Mrs. Neresis be driven home. Obtain her address. Ascertain also the names of her husband's immediate kin and their present occupations. Return with the information by this evening translation. We were on the case, even if Wolfe would deny it until his lips turned blue." I stood. "Sure. Do I also bring along a gas mask?" Neither of them smiled. I got her into a cab with the window cranked down and my nose pointed at the Hudson. On the way, she gave me an address in Astoria and a list that came out like beads from a worry string. Andreas and Petros, her husband's brothers, both in the importing game. A partner named Victor Hollis, who was American and didn't understand how Greeks speak when they are angry. A cousin, Dimitra Karapanos, who had a law degree, a loud opinion, and a bigger telephone book, and a housekeeper called Tula, who, according to the widow, had gone quiet. If there's one thing I don't like in a housekeeper, it's gone quiet. It's a phase that can cover anything from a sudden religious revelation to cash in a drawer. I let the cab drop her and didn't linger for a chorus. Across the street, a trio of men at a cafe table pretended to look at the racing forms while staring holes in her, and one of them said something in Greek that was probably not. "Good morning." I phoned Lon Cohen from the corner. He had the Gazette file in 5 minutes. Kostas Neresis, 48, shipping brokerage, funeral at St. Basil's, small write-up. No police interest beyond the medical examiner's note that it was misadventure. "Choking," Lon added, in the tone of a man sharing the good part of a story, that there had been a whisper about a handsome term, life policy, coming up for audit and a partnership agreement under review. In my experience, both audit and review are verbs that put the spring in a motive step. Back at the brownstone, Fritz had cracked the kitchen window and was burning something delicate to erase the morning's guest. Wolfe was in his chair pretending the world didn't exist, which is his favorite prelude to dealing with it. I gave him the address, the names, Lon's morsels, and a report on the street opinion. He nodded once and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Garlic," he said, as if announcing a diagnosis for civilization. The herb itself is innocent. The symbol is not. Whoever wields it has found a vulgar instrument with unusual leverage, which suggests, I said, somebody who doesn't need chemistry when slander will do. He closed his eyes. "You are not irredeemable. Call Mr. Cohen back for the text of the obituary and any corrections filed by the family. Ask Dr. Vollmer if he will procure a copy of the death certificate, sparing us the exertion. And," he added, "open the window." I was halfway to it when the doorbell performed a frantic solo. I went and got 2 men who didn't wait for an invitation because they had brought their own. They smelled faintly like the widow's aura and looked enough alike to pass for bookends, black hair trimmed short, faces carved from hurry and grievance. The taller one declared he was Andreas, the other, Petros. They had come, they said, to prevent a ridiculous and offensive employment of Mr. Wolfe's time. Mr. Wolfe is fresh out of offensive employments, I told them, and low on ridiculous. If you wish to donate either, you can try the Yellow Pages. That slowed them enough to let me usher them in without a wrestling match. I positioned them on the red leather with the distance a man keeps from a skunk on a leash. Wolfe didn't rise. He never does. He did, however, open his eyes and give them a look that has sent better men than these to their corners. "State your business." Andreas spread his hands like a man showing a dealer he was clean. "We will not have our family name taken in the mouth of that woman. She killed our brother, maybe not with poison, but with—" He flicked his fingers in front of his face. with shame, with this smell. She forced what he hated. She mocked him with it. "You are asserting that your late brother disliked garlic," Wolfe said. "A matter of taste dressed as evidence." "Curious." "Everyone knows," Petros snapped. "He never ate it. Our mother's scordalia he would not touch." Andreas cut in without finesse. "He ate our mother's food always." He was respectful. He heard himself, and the air went out of his chest. They glanced at each other, and both decided to scowl at me instead. "The point," Andreas recovered, "is that she is dangerous. If you protect her with your famous seat in your famous house, we will go to the newspapers." "You will do what you like," Wolfe said. "I'm not an umbrella. You can take your reign elsewhere. But here are my conditions. In this room, no one eats, smokes, perfumes, or parades their emotions as facts. You have already violated 2 of those conditions. Archie, a towel with vinegar for the radiator. I didn't argue the decor. I set the towel, and heat made quick work of the ambience, which didn't improve their mood. Wolfe watched them the way an astronomer watches comets. Interesting, disruptive, and entirely outside his reach. "You mention hatred," he said. "Did Mr. Neresis often express his dislikes as absolutes?" "He did not make absolutes," Petros said, and then, "He made decisions." "Big difference." Wolfe let the syllables sit. "And this policy and partnership arrangement, were you beneficiaries?" They stiffened in harmony. Petros found a thin smile. "You do not waste time." "The policy is for his wife. The firm is securely capitalized." "Securely capitalized," Wolfe repeated, as if tasting a wine label. "Then you will not object if Mr. Goodwin speaks with Mr. Hollis." "We object to the wife," Andreas said, with a flash of heat. "She brings shame." "Shame is a social fiction," Wolfe said, "but a profitable one. Archie, note that these gentlemen came unbidden to my door within hours of their sister-in-law leaving it. They are concerted, which is instructive. Gentlemen, you may go. If you return, make an appointment and bring fewer assertions." They weren't used to being dismissed like flies. They stood, grim, and took their garlic with them. When the door was shut, Wolfe let his breath out in a cylinder. "Contradiction," he said. "One insists the decedent spurned his mother's dish. The other insists he honored it. That is not a contradiction of memory. It is a collision of intent. Someone is curating the dead man's palate to suit a narrative." "Which gives us," I said, "a mother who cooked, a housekeeper who's gone quiet, a partner who's capitalized, and a policy that pays the widow. If I had a nickel for every widow who didn't collect, I'd still be broke." "You will telephone, Mr. Hollis for 3 o'clock, Wolfe instructed. "Then you will find the housekeeper Tula and listen to her silence. And before dinner, obtain from Mrs. Neresis the receipt for the soup in question. If garlic is our cudgel, I will see it measured, not waved." He closed his eyes again, and I knew from the angle of his head that the orchid room would have to wait. The brownstone had been disturbed to his satisfaction. Mine would come after I got a partner, a housekeeper, and a recipe to line up in a row and stop wiggling. I booked Hollis for 3 o'clock with the ease of a man who has never had garlic trouble over a telephone. His secretary said he was in conference, which is what they call a nap south of Wall Street, but a minute later the man himself came on, with a firm, pleasant baritone and a line about respecting Wolfe's reputation. 3 o'clock, Bowling Green. No nonsense. Come alone. If there's anything I come with more reliably than alone, it's nonsense. But I didn't advertise. Before I left, I put in a call to the widow to ask for the recipe and the housekeeper. She said Tula hadn't come for 2 days and wouldn't answer the phone, which for a housekeeper is like a fireman refusing ladders. As for the recipe, she had one in her mother's hand, Greek script with numerals like elbows, and a receipt from Ilios Market on 30th Avenue for garlic heads, stock bones, bread. I told her to keep them warm. I was on my way. Astoria at noon had the kind of sun that flattens tempers. The Nerezes building had a foyer with an icon of saint. George and a row of mailboxes banged more than the drums at a wedding. The hallway air was honest about onions and old varnish. Her door opened before I knocked twice. Calliope had been listening for enemies and got me instead. Today she wore grey and the garlic hung around her like a rumor that paid rent. I took the kitchen first because in a Greek household, a kitchen will tell you whether a story is cooking. It was clean with the stubborn neatness of someone trying to wash away an accusation. On the counter lay a small linen sachet tied with twine. She caught my look and shrugged like it had betrayed her. "They throw cloves at my door," she said. "Sometimes little pouches." Last night someone hung that on the knob. Her mouth curved without humor. "A curse you can smell." I used my handkerchief to lift the sachet. The twine had fresh grease on it, the kind you get rubbing a clove with a knife. Fritz would have had an opinion I couldn't print. On the table sat a recipe card, brown from fingers and time. The title at the top, Skordosopa, was in Greek, but beneath, someone had neatly penciled an English crib. 6 cloves crushed, bread, broth, oil, salt. The handwriting on the English was not the same as the Greek. I slid both into an envelope she provided, with as little contact as a man picks up a live eel. "The receipt?" I asked. She handed me a folded slip. Ilios Market, 2 heads garlic, marrow bones, stale bread, parsley, lemons. Paid cash. The date matched the night of the collapse. "I bought," she said, and met my eye. "I do not hide." He said he would try a spoon for courtesy. Then he had a cough. Then more. She stopped, and that was good idea number 1. "Who else knew you were making it?" I said. "The brothers." "Mr. Hollis?" Her lips tightened around the partner's name. "Victor does not visit my kitchen." "Anyone else?" She hesitated. Then, "Dimitra." She came that afternoon with papers. She said garlic was a bad idea, that Costas must be careful of business headlines. Another shrug. "She says everything." As if cued by union rules, the bell rang. I opened to a woman with competent shoes and a face that had never learned to apologize. She marched in, kissed Calliope on both cheeks without looking, and turned her attention to me like a searchlight. "You're Wolfe's man," she said. "Dimitra Karapanos. If you've come to manufacture sympathy for this melodrama, please don't drip it on the floors." "Not a drop," I said. "I'm here for dry facts and a recipe." "I've got both. Anything you want to add to the stew?" She laughed once, without warmth. "Yes, my cousin married a man who made money without learning how to keep it. There is a life policy that lawyers will poke at because that's all they know how to do. The brothers are hot-blooded and idiots. Victor Hollis is cold-blooded and not an idiot. The widow is unlucky." She turned to Calliope. "And you must stop leaning on the sacred smell. If Costas hated garlic, why did you parade it to the world?" Calliope's voice came out low. "Because he said he would try for me." "People say many things an hour before they change their minds," Dimitra said. "He also said he would revisit the partnership clauses. He also said he would speak to the bank." Words, she noticed the sachet on the counter. "And you keep their taunts?" "Throw it out." "I keep it because it is proof," Calliope said. "Proof that they make a joke of me." Dimitra's eyes sliced to me, measuring whether I was collecting proofs or theater. "You will tell Mr. Wolfe," she said, "that I will not have the Gazette turning this into a romance. If he needs finances, he can subpoena them when he has a judge. Until then, tell him to keep his seat and not his megaphone." "Wolfe was born with his seat," I said. "He only borrows megaphones." She made a noise that covered disdain and farewell and left. I filed her under, not shy about conflict, and checked my watch. If I wanted to be south by 3, I had to prize something out of Tula. Calliope said the housekeeper lived 1 block over in a basement flat with a window that stared at the ankles of passing strangers. I caught her there after 2 knocks. A small woman with a worn sweater, a saint's medallion, and the look of someone who had recently decided silence was a career. I kept my hands in my pockets and my voice easy. "I don't arrest people for bad cooking," I said. "I just ask who did it." She swallowed. "Madam cooked. I washed bowls. Mr. Costas." He said no. He said only a little. He coughed. He hated garlic. She pressed her lips. He said his mother made with potatoes. He liked that when he was young. "Now," she shook her head. "Stomach. Night is bad." She glanced at my envelope. "You have the card." "That is the old way." "Not too much." "And the brothers," I said. "Did they come after?" "Before?" "They come always," she said, and I couldn't argue with theology. "They speak loud. They say she is poison. I do not like loud, neither do I when it comes in pairs. I thanked her and made the train for Bowling Green with the envelope tucked under my arm like a loaf. Hollis's office had the kind of view that persuades men to make deals even when they don't believe in commerce. He was tall, trim, mid-40s, in a suit that understood exchange rates. He shook my hand with dry efficiency and gestured at a chair that had not been sat in by a Greek relative. "I'll say this once," he began. "Costas's death was an accident. The firm is securely capitalized." That phrase did a little dance in my ear. If I heard it again, I'd buy it a hat. "I'm not a regulator," I said. "I'm a listener." "Where were you that night?" "Philadelphia," he said. "A client dinner. You may call the hotel." He slid a card toward me with 3 numbers on it as if I were a reluctant cousin. "Whatever the family stirs, I wish to remain out of the pot. But since you're Mr. Wolfe's man, Costas was under pressure from his brothers to move money we didn't have. He refused, largely at my urging. He told them to wait 2 quarters. You know what brothers are. I'm learning a vocabulary," I said. "Did he dislike garlic?" He allowed himself a smile. He disliked inefficiency. If garlic delivered it, he would dislike that too. I gave him my best blank, because sometimes a blank is more talkative than a grin. He coughed once like a man who knows how to end meetings. I left with the card and a note in my head that, securely capitalized, was collecting friends. On the sidewalk, I phoned Wolfe. He listened without interrupting, which is what a man does when you're doing it right. When I got to the recipe, he said, "Bring it, the English and the Greek, and examine, without touching, the widow's handbag clasp. If there is oil, it is not perfume." "It's not Chanel," I said. "I'll stop by." "Do," he said, and hung up to resume not moving. I turned north with an envelope of soup and the feeling that somebody had been seasoning more than stock. I didn't like leaving a question hanging on Wolfe's hook, so I swung back to Astoria for one more look that wouldn't look like one more look. Calliope let me in without comment. I told her I'd forgotten a detail and asked her to sit in the chair she'd used earlier. Her handbag, black calf with a brass clasp, rested on the arm where she'd put it before. I stood as if the chair's stitching fascinated me and took a long, slow eyeful of the hardware. The clasp hinge had a faint shimmer along the pivot, not general shine, but a line, like someone had dragged a fingertip across it and left a trace. The leather around it was dull. If you're going to get residue from a kitchen, it won't arrange itself in a neat arc on the metal and skip the strap. I didn't touch. Wolfe had been specific. I stepped back, asked a few harmless nothings about Tula's habits, and left with the envelope under my arm and a mental note that the widow's curse was being carried on fittings, not feelings. The subway uptown was doing its usual rehearsal for Judgment Day. At 59th, a small man in a cap pressed in, and a woman with a paper bag tried to adjust my ribs for me. When I came up on 35th, I cut west on autopilot and felt clean air for the first time since noon. Fritz opened the door before I rang. He does that when he's timing something and dislikes the bell. Mr. Wolfe waits, he said, and someone rang and went away. He made a face like someone had tracked mud through a cathedral. A joke. On the stoop, he pointed me to a saucer in the hall table, a clove wrapped in waxed paper like a bonbon and tied with red thread. Fritz had nudged it with a spoon, not fingers. I could have framed it and put it in a museum under neighbors. Add it to the exhibit, I told him. Title card, Subtlety. Wolfe's eyes tracked the envelope as if it were a rare moth. I crossed the rug, placed it on his desk blotter, and stepped back. He opened a drawer, took out a magnifier and a thin bamboo skewer that I had seen him use on stamps and on people. He prodded the flap, sniffed, shook his head, and slid the Greek card out onto the leather. The receipt came with it, folded once. He waited. I waited. He glanced up. The English crib, he said. Was inside, I said, when I left her kitchen. It is not inside now, he said, without heat. He turned the envelope and showed me the top corner, where the gum met the paper. Cut, with a blade. Not torn. The fibers say so. Your coat pocket? Buttoned, I said. However, the city still has elbows. He settled back, eyelids lowering half a notch, which is Wolfe's way of roaring. Not content with scattering sachets and libels, someone has taken pains to remove an item whose utility was purely interpretive. The Greek is of more value, but the English is convenient for those who do not read it. You noted the English hand differed from the Greek. Yes, the English looked neat, recent, and now it is absent, he said. We are curated. He went to work on the Greek card, turning it this way and that under the glass, reading silently with a little motion of the lips he can't help when the alphabet changes. Bread, he said. Oil, stock, salt, garlic, 3 cloves crushed. He raised an eyebrow. What did you read? 6 on the English, I said. Big loop on the 6. The kind a careful cousin makes when she wants to be legible. Someone wants the number to be whatever serves, Wolfe murmured. 3 makes a domestic soup. 6 makes an accusation. I told him about the handbag clasp. He listened, the way a man listens when the waitress says the chef has changed suppliers. A trace on metal only? He asked. Neat as a signature. Good, he said. Not good that it exists, but good that it failed to be clumsy. That is a hand, not an atmosphere. He tapped the receipt. The market? Ilios on 30th. The slip matches the night he collapsed. Bones, bread, lemons, garlic heads. Paid cash. He drummed once with a fingertip, stopped and looked past me at nothing. Archie, telephone Mr. Cohen. Ask whether the Gazette received a correction to the obituary and from whom. He will have told you if he had it then. He did not. Now he may I dialed Lon, while Wolfe contemplated the Greek like a bishop with a confession. Lon answered on the second ring and didn't need warming up. I was about to call you, he said. You have admirers. A correction request came in an hour ago from a Karapanos, Demetra. Adds a line. The decedent was known to be allergic to garlic. We're holding it because no doctor line supports it. But there's pressure. Who else? I asked. A letter from an A. Nereses wanting a feature on immigrant virtues, he said. I'll let you guess the adjectives. I hung up and reported. Wolfe's mouth went thinner than paper. Allergy, he repeated, as if testing the word for rot. That is not a culinary dislike, it is a weaponized alibi. To make the victim's taste an absolute is to condemn the cook for violating it. To name it allergy is to dress opinion as medicine. Demetra's hand, I said. She came with papers and left without apologizing. Possibly, he said, but consider utility. An English crib that says 6 cloves implies extravagance. Remove it, and the Greek 3 demotes the act to household practice. Meanwhile, declare an allergy in the press to make even 3 look murderous, and smear metal so that the accused carries scent without agency. He flicked the bamboo skewer at the envelope, and cut the envelope not for theft of value, but for convenience of narrative. Someone is curating if Hollis is securely capitalized. He won't waste time on sources, I said. The brothers, though, they're loud. Demetra's precise. Tula's quiet. The market clerk may have a memory. Good, Wolfe said. The market first, the housekeeper later. And you will have the widow telephone the scorta super in Greek to me while you listen. So we possess a second copy that cannot be lifted from your pocket. He closed his eyes. Also, have Fritz boil 2 cloves in broth in the kitchen, door shut, so I may refresh my sense of the range of odor. There is a question about intensity. He reopened them. And Archie, another matter. When you left the widow, did you keep your hand to your inner pocket? I kept my hand on my patience, I said, but I'll be a Boy Scout next time. Do, he said, not smiling. Because someone with a blade wished to be helpful to our understanding. He gestured at the saucer in the hall, and they have already knocked at my door. Consider that a trespass, however quaint. I do. I went to the kitchen to deputize Fritz as a reluctant perfumer and called Calliope to line up a dictation in 2 languages. On my way back past the office, Wolfe's chair was still, his eyes half-lidded. He wasn't moving, but the room felt smaller, as if he had slid a net into place that the rest of us couldn't see. Calliope phoned in 10 minutes flat and read the recipe twice. Once in Greek at a measured pace while Wolfe murmured along, and once in her own careful English. I took it down and read it back. 3 cloves crushed, bread softened in hot broth, oil whisked in, salt. Wolfe had me ask her whether her mother ever wrote 6. She was certain not. He thanked her, which in his dialect is rare currency, and hung up with the air of a man who had locked a drawer and tossed the key into his vest pocket. Ilios Market sat between a tailor who believed in chalk and a cafe that believed in sugar. Inside, crates of lemons shone like brass buttons, and a display of garlic heads tried to pass for a bouquet. The clerk who rang me up on the receipt was there, a narrow fellow with a bandage on one knuckle and a pencil behind his ear, as permanent as a birthmark. When I showed him the slip, he glanced at it and then at me the way a man looks at a coat, checking cut and seams. Yes, yes, he said. Bones for broth. Bread for thick. 2 heads, good strong heads. He gave me a nod that suggested he approved of the menu, if not the aftermath. Who else that day? I asked. Anybody ask about scorta super, who didn't speak Greek like their grandmother? He smiled with half his face. A lady. Not Greek. Shoes like a school principal. She pointed at the heads and asked, how many for the traditional? I said 3. She said, and for a modern palate? I said some use 6. She bought lemons and thread. Red thread? We have only red, he said, as if that were something I should know from birth. He tipped his head. She had a way of listening that made the words stand straight. Demetra had shoes like that. If she'd wanted to know how to build a bomb out of an onion, she'd have had the onion confess. Anybody tell you to remember something for the Gazette? He sniffed. A brother. Big hands, big voice. He told me the dead man could not touch garlic, that all Astoria knew it, that if anyone asked, I must say so. I told him I sell heads and rope, not history. The rope? Thread, he corrected. But when the voice is that big, it is rope. He jerked his chin toward the door. You have a friend. Across the barrels, a compact man in a cap was studying the oranges with the focused attention of a surgeon considering a tangerine. He had the stance of someone taught to keep his feet about him and the kind of shoes that never squeak. When I moved toward the back, he discovered an urgent need to evaluate the feta. When I stopped, he discovered anchovies. I paid for a lemon I didn't need and went out, and my friend drifted. not clumsy. On the sidewalk, his eyes checked the reflection in the window glass the way a man checks a watch. The cap was wrong for Wall Street, and the jaw was wrong for Astoria. I cut right, he cut right. I stepped into a doorway. He discovered he had left something up the block. The choreography was clean enough to deserve an orchestra. I told a taxi to take me nowhere special and used the ride to call Wolfe. He listened while I gave him the clerk's report on shoes, thread, and arithmetic. When I added the shadow with the careful shoes, he grunted. "You're not being trailed for the fun of it," he said. "Someone is measuring our response time. Hold your course. When you reach the house, do not come to the front." "Why not?" I asked, though I knew the tone. "Because," he said, "we have enjoyed a second trespass." Fritz found the basement delivery door unlatched, which is in itself possible, though not by him. More to the point, the knob to this room bears an aromatic smear. A visitor had the courtesy to announce his intended entry, "Garlic?" He made a sound that translated to, "What else?" It is not concentrated. It is a touch, and the drawer with the Greek card is intact because I am not an imbecile. Nevertheless, it is pressure. I have already telephoned Mr. Panzer. If Wolfe dials Saul without me suggesting it, the weather has changed. Who's his assignment? 2, he said. The principal with the shoes if he surfaces again, and Miss Karapanos. If the English crib vanished at a bump of your pocket, she bumps well. Mr. Panzer will contrive to be bumped. I let the taxi drift past the brownstone and got out on the 9th Avenue corner. The cap didn't appear. Either he'd retired or I'd bored him. I swung around to the mews and came in by the back, and Fritz met me with a mouth set for war. He held up a folded dish towel by a corner. Across the cloth was a faint line like the ghost of a fingerprint, and it hit my nose from 3 feet. He had quarantined the knob itself with a strip of linen like a surgeon bandaging an insult. "In my house," he said, in a voice that could have frozen soup. "They make jokes in my house." They wanted Wolfe to smell their sense of humor, I said, and took the stairs 2 at a time. He had the Greek card in plain view on the blotter and the envelope beside it, so whoever had thought getting cute with the door had misread the calendar. I put the market story on the table. When I got to the lady with principal shoes, he nodded as if a procession had moved forward on cue. "Demetra," he said. "She has been busy." A correction request to a newspaper, a reconnaissance at a market, and perhaps an experiment in narrative theft. "Mr. Panzer will enjoy her. I liked the other act," I said. "The cap with the clean shoes and the anchovy fixation. Not one of the brothers," he mused. "Not Mr. Hollis. He is too prudent to hire a man who smells of tail. Possibly a freelancer whose instructions are purely to observe you as you perform your trifles, to judge whether our interests lie in theatrics or in facts." "If theatrics," I said, "we're flopping. If facts, we're making soup." He gave me a look that would have curled parsley. "You will go to the housekeeper. Mr. Panzer will telephone when his shadow is seated. And Archie—" He tapped the towel Fritz had left on the edge of his desk. "Observe. It is not oil displaced by a hand. It is dabbed, applied. To the knob, not the brass plate. That is not contagion. That is handwriting signed with cloves," I said. "Do we frame it?" "We will return it to the sender," he said, "in due time." He leaned back, eyelids lowering a fraction. "And if they attend to our knobs, we will attend to their nerves. Invite Mrs. Neresis here at 8:30. Not before. I will have questions for her that require the presence of my chair, your memory, and Mr. Panzer's feet. 8:30, I said. "Front or back?" "Front," he said, and finally allowed his mouth the suggestion of a line. "Let them perfume the air. I'm curious how much they can afford to waste." I gave Tula another try before the clock crowded 8. The basement window was still full of ankles, and the door chain slid back with the reluctance of a woman who had already used up her quota of words for the week. I told her I wouldn't take many, and she gave me 3 at a time, which was progress. The place smelled of boiled laundry and old varnish. On the table sat a brown envelope with a rubber band that had been dignified with 2 wraps of red thread. She saw me notice and put her hand on it like a catechism. "From who?" I asked. She stared at the thread as if it could answer for her. "For quiet," she said. "For church candles," and moved the envelope toward a drawer. The band left a faint pink line on her fingers. "If you have to bribe silence, you can at least avoid leaving your brand color." "Before you put the candles on the altar," I said, "tell me who wrote the English recipe card." Her eyes flicked up. "The cousin. Demetra. She say Americans need English. She writes 6. She held up 3 fingers, then doubled them to 6 the way a child does the trick. "But the mother. 3. Always 3. Who gave you the red thread, Tula?" She blew air through her nose, a sound that didn't qualify as laughter. "The market only has red. But this," she touched the band, "this is not market. Market is on a roll. This is from a sewing box I left her to her candles and my envelope of soup to Wolfe's blotter. Saul phoned while I was still in the cab uptown. He had tailed Demetra from her office to a copy shop on Lexington, then to a florist where she didn't buy flowers, which is a good way to talk to a man about deliveries without getting petals on your shoes. After that, she took a cab to the Gazette and went in by a side door that even reporters forget. His other line was the man in the cap, not one of the brothers. Too neat. He had a habit of cleaning his nails with a key when bored, and he wasn't bored often. "Keeps to the right side of the sidewalk," Saul said, which in his code book meant ex-police or someone trained not to bump. License plate when he used a car earlier was a rental out of Queens. "I'll get the contract in the morning." Fritz put the widow in the front room at 8:28 and cracked a window by an inch, an allowance I had never seen him make for weather or royalty. Calliope came in with the same fog around her and the handbag with the brass clasp. Wolfe didn't stand, but he did incline his head, which, for him, is both a welcome and a promise. He thanked her for reading the recipe, asked if she had eaten, and then ignored the answer. "Madam," he said, "you're being made into an emblem. First a scent, then a word. Allergy, planted to create an absolute. The scent can be carried and transferred. The word can be repeated until it bruises truth. I propose to test both." He asked permission to examine the clasp with a bit of blotting paper. She hesitated the amount a woman does when considering a violation of her property versus a violation of her life, and she nodded. I brought the blotter, and he tore a strip with a fingernail as neat as a razor's apprentice. He pressed, light and exact, along the arc of the hinge, then held the paper under his nose, not breathing as much as thinking. He passed it to me. Even with Fritz's kitchen door shut and the window open, the line lifted a little and struck cleanly. Garlic, but not the breathy, broad version. Wolfe looked toward the hall where Fritz, in a war with air, patrolled. "Not a stew," he said. "Oil. Expressed, not cooked. Someone brushed your clasp, madam, where a lady's fingers don't rest when she opens it." She looked at her hands as if they had betrayed her. "On the subway," she murmured. "A man bumped. Another time at church, someone touched my sleeve and said, 'Condolences.' I washed my hands. The smell stayed. It would," Wolfe said. "Oil is a clinger. The performance relies on the illusion that the atmosphere is your fault." He turned to me. "Tell her about the knob." I did. She flinched once and steadied. "They will not stop," she said. "They like a story with no woman to answer it." "On the contrary," Wolfe said, "they will stop when the story costs them something." "Did Mr. Neresis ever see a doctor about this supposed allergy?" "No," she said. "He had trouble at night, stomach, coughing. The doctor said, avoid heavy food, wine late. He never said the word you use. Wolfe's mouth made a motion that, in another man, would have been a smile. The word is a cudgel because it masquerades as medicine. We will relieve it of its uniform. He tapped the envelope on his desk. The English gloss on your mother's card. Demetra wrote it. He didn't inflect it as a question. She nodded anyway. She took it, Calliope said, suddenly urgent. That day. She said it must be kept safe, that people would twist it. I thought she meant to protect me. She meant to curate you, Wolfe said. The same person who asks a shopkeeper for the traditional number and the modern number will also choose which version of you to display. He leaned back. You will telephone Miss Carapanos tonight and tell her you are coming here tomorrow at 11 for advice. Since Mr. Wolfe is a bully and you need a cousin, you will also invite Andreas and Petros to attend. Noon for them. And Archie, call Mr. Hollis for 2, with the assurance that his capital will remain secure if he is punctual. You're scheduling a small riot, I said. I am furnishing a room with facts, he said. The riot attends itself. Before you go to your bed, Mr. Goodwin, you will ask Dr. Vollmer to visit in the morning and bring with him a text on anaphylaxis and a stomach pump from 1932. He will not need the pump. I want him to speak about terms. Calliope had been watching us like someone following a card trick. She wet her lips. They will come, but not to be kind. Excellent, Wolfe said. Kindness is a veil. I prefer eyesight. He let his gaze drift to the hall again. Who delivered the sachet on my stoop, Archie? Fritz didn't see. A ring, then nothing. Then tonight they will try again, he said mildly. Let them. Saul is across the street and less sentimental than a doorbell. If a hand reaches for my knob, I intend to learn who owns the sleeve. The widow's fingers tightened on the handbag. I am tired, she said. So am I, Wolfe said, which was generous as well as false. The difference is that you have been made into a signboard. We will remove the lettering. Archie will see you home. Do not accept condolences on the way I got her to the curb. Across the street, Saul stood where a man stands when he is not blocking anyone's view. He lifted 2 fingers as if counting cloves. When we helped her into the cab, a boy darted to our stoop and bent quick as a pickpocket. Saul moved without seeming to, and the boy found his ear held by a hand that had spent years disliking foolishness. The parcel he'd been about to leave fell open on the top step. Waxed paper, thread, garlic, and a typewritten strip. Allergy kills. Saul glanced at me and the corner of his mouth admitted a private joke. Some people, he said softly, can't cook. Saul released the boy's ear when it had learned humility and steered him into the front hall where Fritz could watch for pocket removal. The kid was maybe 12, skinny as a fountain pen, with a face that said he'd run errands since he could run. I gave him a chair and $1 placed where it could be seen, but not reached. Who gives you treats for the house with the brown stone? I asked. He flicked eyes at Saul and then at my $1. Guy from the cafe, he said. Theo calls me when there's a drop. The guy phones Theo first. The bag is already made. What guy? Chapter. Not Greek. He keeps his hands in his pockets, the boy said. And warming added, except when he cleans his nails. He's neat. He says kid like he's counting. That was close enough to earn him the coin. And the strip of paper? Already cut, he said. He gave Theo a stack last time. Theo says to run when the man calls. He gives me $0.25 and the man gives Theo $1. Saul's mouth bent a millimeter. That's inflation, he murmured. He took the boy's name and a promise to stay out of entrepreneurship for 36 hours, which is as binding as oaths get at 12, and turned him loose. Fritz disposed of the wax paper like it was radioactive and went to scrub something that had not sinned. Wolfe heard it all, with lids half down. When we were alone, he said, the cap is the same. the rental car, the right-side walker. He's an instrument. Whoever hires him prefers stagecraft to fists. Good. Call the Gazette Lon answered as if his receiver had been waiting in his hand. Your lady lawyer has friends, he said. Correction desk got 3 calls in 20 minutes from polite voices with civic concerns. The word allergy is migrating from suggestion to insistence. Hold it until you see a doctor's letter, I said. At 11 tomorrow, we're convening a Greek chorus that may sing in harmony for once. Music to my ears, he said. I'll keep the page clean until noon. I shifted to doctor. Vollmer and got him at home, which is where a doctor lives when he's off duty. He agreed to stop by mid-morning with a short talk on anaphylaxis and a long face for anyone who tried to use it as a club. Choking on soup because of garlic is not a medical category, he said. An anaphylactic reaction would look rather different. If the brothers want definitions, I'll bring them. I returned to the office. Wolfe had the Greek card in front of him and the blotter strip sealed in a glassine envelope as if he were curating a butterfly. Demetra first, he said. She answered briskly, already halfway through a sentence when the line connected. I handed her to Wolfe. He gave her his civil voice, the one that sounds like you have entered a library that owns your book. Miss Karapanos, he said. Mrs. Neresis is coming at 11. It would be charitable if a cousin attended. I shall need to settle a small question about a recipe card. You wrote an English gloss, you then removed it. Bring it back. I detest redundancy. She did not waste an opportunity to parry. I removed nothing. If an English crib existed, it was for convenience and must have been misplaced by your operative. Very likely, Wolfe said agreeably. Then your returning it will spare him the mortification of searching his trousers. 11. He let her say she had court, which she doubtless did, and then he let her hear silence until she understood 11 was not movable. When he hung up, he pivoted to me. The brothers. Noon. Tell them that if they persist in pressing allergy through the press, they must bring the name of the physician who diagnosed it, with dates. Or I will infer they are using letters as cudgels. Use the word cudgel. It will bother them. He listened on the extension while I made the calls. Andreas did the talking for both of them and did it at a volume that could have stirred batter. The word I'd been told to use landed and wobbled him. He promised a doctor's name and gave me a proverb. Petros took the phone to add that their mother's Scordalia used potatoes and fidelity, which I recorded under history, not evidence. Hollis at 2, Wolfe said when I hung up. Assure him we will not injure his capitalization. Tell him that a clarification regarding medical terminology may be issued to the Gazette and that he will be happier if he hears it in my office first. Hollis's baritone was still pleasant, but it had the faint rasp of a man who has learned he is on a schedule not of his own making. I'll be there, he said. If what I hear is definitions, I can endure it. If what you hear is arithmetic, I said, bring a pencil. Saul rang again at 10. The man with the cap had checked in at the same rental agency and traded keys. The contract was a cash job under a company name that, according to Saul, belonged to a security outfit that freelanced to law firms and private parties who preferred to stay unnamed. Could be Hollis, Saul said. Could be Demetra. The brothers don't rent cars to watch people. They use cousins. Stay with Demetra, Wolfe told him. The cap is a symptom. She is a condition. He hung up and shut his eyes and left them so while I listened to Fritz make war on the last molecule of garlic downstairs. At 10:30, my phone whispered, Lon again. I'm holding it, he said, but I've also got a note from an advertiser, guess which family, saying they value public health messaging and would support coverage on food allergies. If you're going to pop a balloon, do it at 11:15. Bring a pin, I said. We'll supply helium. The house settled. The orchids were safe for another night, and the knob was wrapped to offend no one but the person who had dabbed it. Wolfe opened his eyes and said, There is a line one does not cross with me, and it has nothing to do with homicide. Trespass is crude. Narrative trespass, however, stealing a word and putting it in another's mouth, is worse. Tomorrow we return the word to its owner. He sent me to bed with reminders. Have the stenotype ready, keep the windows cracked, call Saul if footsteps multiplied on the stoop. I slept like a man between acts and woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Fritz humming an old tune in a new key. By 10:50, the room had that pre-storm brightness it gets when Wolfe decides he will not have to move because he has moved everyone else. At 11 on the nose, the bell rang, steady and punctual. I went to the door, and the garlic came with the widow, and behind it, in the street, a dark sedan idled with a man in a cap who pretended not to look. I smiled at him the way a man smiles at weather. Inside, Wolfe had his chair, his glassine envelope, his Greek card, and a faint, contented line at the corner of his mouth. That meant the net was ready, and the fish were circling. I brought the widow into the office and left the door an inch ajar for Fritz's sake. Wolfe gave her the same nod he'd give a duke and pointed her to the red leather. The glassine envelope with the blotter strip sat at his elbow like a moth he'd pinned, and the Greek card lay square on the blotter. I took my chair and kept an ear for the bell because punctual people don't like to be told they are late. Demetra arrived at 11:05 with a briefcase that looked like it had passed the bar on its own. She shook no hands and let her eyes sweep the room for witnesses. "I have 20 minutes, she said. "Make them count." "They will," Wolfe told her. "Sit, Madame." To Calliope. "Bear with an experiment." He pressed the bell and Fritz came in with a tray holding 3 narrow slips of blotting paper, each in its own little glass dish, and withdrew without approving of any of us. Wolfe took the first dish and waved it lightly. "Garlic oil, expressed." Dabbed. He set it before Calliope and inclined his head. Even from where I sat, I caught the precise, clingy punch. He slid the second to Demetra. "Broth infused with 2 cloves." Door shut. It was broader, warmer, a kitchen, not a smear. The third he kept. Neutral. Demetra sniffed like a committee rejecting a budget. "I see your point, mister." "Wolfe," she said, "you are staging a pageant. The widow is perfumed by enemies." "But soup killed my cousin." "The medical examiner found pieces. He found fragments," Wolfe said, as if correcting a menu, "which may be bread, softened in broth and propelled into the trachea by a cough. We will leave physiology to a physician." He let the last word hang until the bell answered it. I went for the door and got Doctor. Volmer with a worn bag and the expression of a man who has brought rain to a brush fire. Wolfe introduced him by name only. Volmer nodded to the women, took the chair I placed, and was brief. "Anaphylaxis," he said, "is an acute systemic reaction. You would see wheezing, hives, swelling of lips or tongue, a rapid drop in blood pressure, possible collapse. It does not present as choked on a spoon of soup and fell, not without prodrome. Garlic intolerance exists, stomach upset, reflux, but allergy, in the popular sense, is a generous word and misused. If there is a diagnosis, there will be a doctor and a record. If there isn't, the word is a cudgel." Demetra's mouth curved. "Public health messaging matters, Doctor." "One must warn the public. One must not invent medicine," he returned, without raising his voice. Wolfe said, "Miss Carapanos, you asked the Gazette to correct an obituary to insert the term allergic to garlic. Please name the physician who diagnosed it." She met that like a fencer. I asked the Gazette to acknowledge that Costas could not abide garlic. Everyone knew it. If the clerk phrased it medically, that is on the clerk. Wolfe said, which can mean anything from "you're clever" to "you're sinking." And the English gloss on Mrs. Nereus's recipe card. "You wrote it, 6 cloves." He turned his palm up. Return it. She closed the briefcase a fraction. I have no such paper. Tula says you wrote it, I put in. And the market clerk remembers shoes like yours asking tradition versus modern and buying lemons and thread. He sells only red that got a tick in Demetra's cheek. If I ask a grocer what his clients do, it is not a crime. As for thread, women sew, she turned to the widow. Callie, if you persist in letting these men theatricalize you, they will print you. Calliope's hands clenched. They already print me, she said. As a joke. Exactly, Wolfe said, which brings me to handwriting. He lifted the glassine and the blotter strip from Calliope's clasp, held them up, and set them down again. A smear on metal where fingers do not rest to open a clasp. A dab on my doorknob. Wax paper on my step with a typewritten strip. Allergy kills. Miss Karapanos, yesterday you visited a copy shop on Lexington and the Gazette by a side door. Mr. Panzer observed you. This morning a boy attempted to leave another sachet on my stoop. He says the packets are prepared by a man in a cap who keeps his hands in his pockets when he is not cleaning his nails. He is not Greek. He is tidy. He rents cars under a security company's name. You will tell me whether that man works for you. Her chin went higher, but her eyes cut to the glassine before they came back. I do not hire boys to litter your stoop. I asked about the man, Wolfe said, gentle as a butcher with a veal chop. No, she said, I do not hire men in caps. She rose an inch and sat again. And if I did, I would not tell you in front of her. Then we will do it another way, Wolfe said. You will bring me the English gloss at 2. If you fail, I will infer that you prefer to control both numbers, 3 when you need a domestic soup, 6 when you need a scandal. At noon, your cousins by marriage will arrive with the name of the physician who diagnosed an allergy. If they cannot, I shall advise the Gazette that allergy is being used as a cudgel, and I shall have a physician on the record to say so. At 2, Mr. Hollis will hear arithmetic that does not injure his capital, but may injure reputations. You are a lawyer. You can chart the consequences. She glanced at her watch with an expression I wouldn't hang in a nursery. You bully well from a chair, she said. At 2, I have court. At 2, you have a choice, Wolfe said, and let it sit. Volmer stood. I have patience. If anyone wants to discuss reflux and aspiration, my office has chairs. Demetra rose with him. At the door she paused, turned to Calliope, and delivered it with precision. If you love the smell of your mother's kitchen, keep it there. The street is not kind to Wolfe. Noon will be noisy. She left a wake of competent leather and exited. When the latch caught, Wolfe drew a breath that did not qualify as relief. Madame, he told Calliope, you have been informed that the street is unkind. Consider this room an alley with better furniture. It will serve. He rang for Fritz. Coffee for Mrs. Neresis. Mr. Goodwin, have Saul be so good as to escort our cap to a later appointment if he tries my stoop again. And tell Mr. Cohen to keep his page clean until 12:15 I called Lon. He purred like a cat who had been promised cream. Out the front window the dark sedan idled, the cap forward, a statue pretending not to notice the door he wanted. At 11:50, footsteps announced plural intent. Andreas and Petros come with thunder, even when they try to tiptoe. I got them into the front room and left them there under Fritz's basilisk eye. In the office, Wolfe adjusted his cuffs a quarter inch and let his lids sink. It's a ritual. When he opens them again, some people have learned new words, and some words have lost their uniforms. I fetched the brothers from Fritz's quarantine and steered them into the office with the kind of spacing you use when a pair of cymbals insist on being musical. They arrived pre-warmed, Andreas with the jaw set for denunciations, Petros with the eyes that do the arithmetic on how many chairs can be overturned without buying new ones. Calliope sat very straight on the red leather with her cup balanced like a sacrament. Wolfe did not rise. He let them see him in his chair, and then let them feel it. You asked for noon, Andreas began, which was not true, and we came. We will not have— You will sit, Wolfe said, not loudly, and they did, as if the word had weight to it. We will conserve noise. Item 1. The Gazette. You have asked to insert allergic to garlic into an obituary. Name the diagnosing physician and date. Andreas opened his hands, palms up for heaven to read. All Astoria knows. Not a physician, Wolfe said. A gossip. Petros. Petros glanced at his brother and found no help there. He did not eat it, he said stubbornly, since a boy. Our mother— Wolfe's eyelids sank a fraction. Your mother's scordalia, he said evenly, has been invoked both as a dish he refused and one he honored. You cannot serve both plates to the same memory. If there is a doctor, produce the name. If there is not, the word allergy will be retired from your mouths. Andreas's nostrils flared. A lawyer told us it was wiser to— Ah, Wolfe tilted his head. Miss Karapanos? She is precise, and precision misapplied is worse than sloth. Item 2. My stoop. A boy employed by a man in a cap working through a cafe, a Theo, has delivered sachets here with typewritten strips. If you are paying Theo, stop. If you are not, you will not object when Mr. Panzer asks Theo who is Andreas's ears reddened. Theo is a fool, he said, which was not an answer. Fools are useful, Wolfe said. Item 3. The widow's handbag. A dab of oil on a hinge where a lady's fingers do not rest. Your family makes a pageant of scent. It is vulgar, and it ends now. Petros lifted his chin. She killed him, he said with the dull weight of faith. Stop, Wolfe said, and for once he said it like a man who had permitted too much noise already. The medical examiner certified misadventure, choking. A physician, Dr. Vollmer, has explained the difference between anaphylaxis and indigestion. If you wish to contest misadventure, hire counsel. If you wish to parade a cudgel of allergy in the press, you will meet me there with a doctor, and you will lose. The Gazette is holding your calls. At 12:15 they will receive a statement either withdrawing your insistence or naming a physician. Choose the room. Did that hush it gets when a man realizes he has already said the thing that will cost him and has to select which pocket he wants the bill taken from. Andreas swallowed, and I heard in it the click of teeth closing on pride. We will tell them to hold, he said. For now. Not for now, Wolfe said. Withdraw. Permanently. If you later acquire a physician, you may publish. Until then, you will cease turning a dislike into a diagnosis. Andreas put his hand in his pocket for a handkerchief and came out with a phone. He looked at Petros, and then at Wolfe, and then at the floor. He dialed and gave a burst of Greek that had verbs in it even I could recognize. Stop, withdraw, clean. He listened, said a name I'd heard before with less fondness, Demetra, and hung up with his mouth narrower. Item 4, Wolfe said as if ticking a ledger. Money. Mr. Hollis urged restraint. You urged movement. You pressed your brother to move money we did not have, in Mr. Hollis's phrase. Why? Andreas collected himself. Opportunities. A new line on perishables. We needed capital. He lost the stomach to grow. He said wait 2 quarters. He hid behind the American partner. Wolfe said. The partner who will be here at 2. While you pressed for capital elsewhere, you were also underwriters of a narrative in which your sister-in-law's kitchen became a scaffold. You did not need her to be guilty. You needed her to be doubtful. Doubt stalls a policy audit. Doubt chills a bank. Doubt makes a widow sell cheaply. He turned his head, not much, toward Calliope, and then back. You will not find that discount here. Petros looked at his hands. We want our brother's work to be respected, he said in a smaller voice. She is unlucky. Then cease making her unlucky, Wolfe said. Call Theo. Tell him there will be no more parcels. Tell him that if Mr. Panzer telephones, he is to put the cap on the line and say who pays him. If the name is not yours, it will be Miss Carapanos's or Mr. Hollis's. If you wish to ensure it is not yours, withdraw. His forefinger made a small circle. From the chorus. Andreas had another burst of Greek handy. This one had fewer verbs and more adjectives. He pocketed the phone like a man stowing away a sharp object. We will not put our name to a doctor we do not have, he said. We will tell Theo to stop. He stood, then sat again, a concession to the chair more than to Wolfe. We will not apologize to her, he added, not looking at Calliope. No, Wolfe said. You will merely stop talking long enough for sense to circulate. That is apology enough for today. The bell rang with the efficiency of a schedule that trusted itself. Fritz's step went and returned. He announced with the dignity of a court officer calling a case he disliked. Mr. Hollis Wolfe lifted a hand at the brothers. Remain. You will benefit to me. Seat him. Hollis came in composed and ironed, clocking at a glance that the room contained both smoke and fire. He nodded to me, to the widow, to the brothers, as if they were investors he would keep on the Christmas list, and took the chair I pointed to. The baritone was pleasant. The eyes were not careless. I'm here to hear definitions, he said, and then, catching the scent of the remains of Fritz's demonstration, added dryly, and perhaps to avoid them. You're here, Wolfe said, to hear arithmetic. He put a finger on the receipt from Ilios and the Greek card and the empty place where the English gloss would have gone if it hadn't walked. Number of cloves, 3. Number of heads bought, 2. Number of hands available to make a center signboard, several. Number of voices calling newspapers with medicine they do not own, too many. Number of quarters, you asked Mr. Neresis to wait, 2. Number of quarters his brothers could not. Hollis watched him as a careful man watches a bridge he didn't design, but may have to cross. And the sum, he asked. The sum, Wolfe said, is this. Someone sought advantage by curating the widow into a trope and the dead man into an absolute. If that someone is you will hear it from me before you read it in the Gazette. If it is not you will assist me in identifying who benefits from a delayed policy and a frightened bank. Hollis glanced once at Andreas. It was quick, but not blind. My firm benefits from stability, he said, not from panic. Good, Wolfe said. Then you will remain while I finish removing uniforms from words. Mr. Goodwin, Mr. Cohen. Noon 15 I dialed. Lon answered like a man listening with his shoes on. Well? Withdrawn, I said. Put the correction in the file where bad ideas go to nap. If you must cover anything today, cover the difference between allergy and rumor. Bless you and your dictionary, he said. I'll keep the page clean and the strip sharp. I hung up. The room held. Outside, a car idled, patient as a hired habit. Inside, Wolfe settled a fraction deeper, which meant he was not moving at all. He looked at Demetra's empty chair as if it were a piece on a board that had declared itself a queen. At 2, he told Hollis, we will see whether a number comes back in English. At 2 o'clock, sharp the bell struck again, and Demetra swept in as though she owned the floor. The briefcase was tighter under her arm, the mouth thinner, the eyes more alert. She didn't glance at the brothers. She barely registered Calliope. Hollis stayed seated with the serenity of a man who prefers to watch others pay their bills first. Wolfe inclined his head the smallest measurable distance. Miss Carapanos, he said, you have brought it? She clicked open the briefcase, drew out a single card, and laid it flat on his blotter with the grace of a dealer sliding an ace. There is your English crib, she said. If my handwriting has become state evidence, so be it. 6 cloves. Not 3, Wolfe didn't move his hands. He simply let his eyes travel from the card to the brothers, then to Hollis, and finally to Calliope. "Observe," he said. 6. Modern, extravagant, not her mother's hand, not her kitchen's measure, and missing from Mr. Goodwin's pocket until now. Demetra smiled like a fencer who had just parried. "I removed nothing. I made a copy. A cousin may protect a cousin. On the contrary," Wolfe said, "you attempted to curate her. When it served, you would waive the English as proof of excess. When it did not, you would destroy it and insist on the Greek 3. Meanwhile, you paraded the word allergy to the Gazette. Your brothers-in-law lent their voices because they are loud. You lent yours because it was precise. But precision in the service of distortion is not virtue. It is sabotage." Andreas half rose. She tried to protect herself," Wolfe cut in, "from the fact that your brother was pressed to move money you did not have. Mr. Hollis urged restraint, and Costas listened. If Costas were alive, your pressure would be plain. If his widow were discounted, you might still wrest control. The English gloss and the sachets were not accidents. They were instruments." Demetra's hand tightened on the briefcase. "You have no proof I hired a man in a cap." "You are incorrect," Wolfe said. He gestured toward the hall. Saul opened the door and ushered in the compact fellow with the cap and the neat shoes, looking less tidy now with Saul's hand on his elbow. "Your messenger," Wolfe said. "The boy names him, the cafe hosts him, the rental agency records him. He has no Greek, but he has orders. If you require him to speak, Mr. Panzer will supply encouragement." The man glanced once at Demetra and then at the rug, which was admission enough. She kept her head high, but her cheekbone pulsed. "You trap shadows," she said coldly. "My cousin is still dead." "Yes," Wolfe said, and his voice was flat as granite. "By misadventure, not by malice. But you have tried to turn misadventure into a spectacle, to erode a widow's standing for the sake of financial leverage. That is contemptible. I will give you this chance. Withdraw from the chorus. Admit that you wrote 6 when tradition said 3. Cease supplying sachets and slogans. Allow your cousin to grieve in peace. If you do not, then Mr. Cohen at the Gazette will have the tale. Your copy shop visits, your correction calls, your cap with his nails. He will publish it with as much relish as you sought to prevent." The silence that followed was thick enough to ladle. Hollis cleared his throat gently, like a man noting the check had arrived. "If you value the firm," he told Demetra, "you will accept his terms. Panic does not increase capital." Andreas muttered something in Greek that wasn't a prayer. Petros looked at the floorboards. Demetra stared at Wolfe as if testing how immovable a mountain truly was. At length she reached, slid the English card back into her case, and snapped it shut. "I will not contest you in the press," she said. "For now." "For always," Wolfe corrected. "You may leave." She rose, spine rigid, and swept out. Saul followed to see her to the curb. The brothers sputtered half-protests, but Wolfe dismissed them with a finger flick. They went, noisier than useful, and Fritz closed the door with audible satisfaction. Calliope remained in her chair, the handbag clasp gleaming under the lamp. She looked from one face to another as if trying to measure what was left of her. "So," she whispered, "I'm not cursed." "Not cursed," Wolfe said, "merely used. Garlic is innocent. It was made into a weapon by those who thought you weak. You are not. You have endured." She breathed once, deeply, as if her lungs had found space again. "Thank you," she said, and rose. She inclined her head to me, then to Wolfe, and walked out without needing me to guide her. The air seemed lighter when the door shut. Hollis stood. "You have prevented a spectacle," he said gravely, "and perhaps saved the firm from a squabble it could ill afford. For that, Mr. Wolfe, you have my respect. He shook my hand, not Wolfe's, and left with his suit still crisp. The house quieted. Wolfe leaned back, closed his eyes, and released a long, slow breath. Archie, inform Mr. Cohen that the widow has been cleared. He may print that the allergy was invention, the sachets crude theatre, and the truth a domestic tragedy. Spare adjectives. Done, I said. And after that, Fritz has lamb chops. I can smell them good, Wolfe murmured. The kitchen restores what rumor destroys. He opened his eyes, heavy-lidded but steady. Remember, Archie, men will invent poisons where none exist if they think it gains them leverage. But truth is sufficient poison to those who court it carelessly. I grinned. Sure, but if truth ever comes sautéed in garlic, don't call me to taste it first. He closed his eyes again, retreating into silence as if the room belonged to him and always would. And that, as usual, was that.